We're about 5 hours from where we should be. Usually, right about the time we start the stream, the day will turn over. It had followed 24 hours perfectly from the time we started the game. However, we're now 5 hours ahead, and this is because of the few decorations we have in our home. The picture of the louse and the pink crystal that we keep in our fireplace. I've just redecorated. It now feels more comfy. We've returned to our throne, and I think today, instead of being introspective on pictures, let's be introspective with books. Let's first review some of our thoughts. There. I could really use a map of the kingdom. We've crossed it out because we have seen a map. I wonder if I've discovered every part of the cave. So far, I haven't seen anything. I have seen a little bit. We've crossed that out because we have explored quite a bit at this point. I've seen a lot of places, but not everything. That's good to know, because I like that sense of exploring, going places that we've never seen before. I wish I had more colors for my art studies. We've crossed that out because I definitely need more pictures on the wall, especially lice pictures. Well, we haven't satisfied his craving for lice pictures. I suppose we can do a few more of those. We do now have the mattock. I could try to enlarge my home by hacking through the walls. There are crystals in many colors. I could harvest some of them and decorate my room. A lot of these are just guides for things you can do in the game. As we had talked about last stream, there are 3 intended ways to play the game. 1, doing nothing. 2, by perhaps looking at our thoughts and discovering these things. And 3, abandoning the home entirely and adventuring, seeing what is beyond the caves. Instead, we're kind of doing a little bit of each, because there's a lot of lore to be found to give us a bigger picture of what's going on. You see, we're not trying to focus just on the Shade and the Shade's adventure and the Shade story, but the world that we're in. What are the bits and pieces of the lore? Where did we come from? Looking at the pictures last time, we kind of can speculate that perhaps this is an afterlife for our Shade. And we'll come back and revisit that thought more at another time. A list of my feelings. That should be some small accomplishment. We have 8 disappointments and various other items. Can't think of anything else. Just continue waiting in loneliness. So let's try to speed up some of the time. Poems. There was one particular picture of a horse head named Poem. Maybe we'll come across that reference today. But just hang out. I'm just gonna read some poetry, and each page we turn is gonna save us a minute, which isn't very many. It's 38 minutes with this one. From my childhood days, rings an old song's plaintive tone. Oh, how long the ways, oh, how long the ways I since have gone. What does the swallow sang? What does swallow sing? In spring or in autumn warm? Do its echoes hang about the farm? When I went away, full coffers and chests were there. When I came today, all was bare. Childish lips so wise, with a lore as rich as gold. knowing all the birds' cries, like the sage of old. Ah, the dear old place, the dear old place, may its sweet consoling gleam shine upon my face, shine upon my face once in a dream. When I went away, full of the joy the world lay there. When I came today, all was bare. Still the swallows come, and the empty chest is filled, but this longing dumb shall never be stilled. Nay, no swallow brings thee again where thou wast before. Though the swallow sings, still as of yore. When I went away, full coffers and chests were there. When I came today, all was bare. It's kind of a longing for something that they had plenty of, which now there is none. Perhaps it was time. One of the pictures the shade had was an image of time. There were three. The first, us sitting on top of it. The second, us being trapped within the sands of time. And three, having escaped the jar of time entirely. So, in some ways, playing this game, you want to speed up the time, you just want it to be finished. Yet, this is my 5th time playing through the game. There is something there to be said about, wishing to go through it again for the first time. The spring of love. Dearest, thy discourses steal from my bosom deep, my heart. How can I from thee conceal my delight, my sorrows smart? Dearest, when I hear thy lyre from its chains, my soul is free. To the holy angel choir from the earth, oh, let us flee. Dearest, how thy music's charms waft me dancing through the sky. Let me round thee clasp my arms, lest in glory I should die. Dearest, sunny wreaths I wear, twined around me by the lay, for thy garlands, rich and rare, oh, how can I thank thee? Say, like the angels, I would be without mortal frame, whose sweet converse is like thought, sounding with acclaim. Or like flowers in the dale, like the stars that glow, whose love songs a beam, whose words like sweet odors flow. Or like to the breeze of morn, waving round its rose, and love's dallying caress melting as it blows. But thy love-lorn nightingale melteth not away. She doth but with longing tones chant her plaintive lay. I am to a nightingale, songless though I sing, 'tis my pen that speaks, though ne'er in the ear it ring. Beaming images of thought doth the pen portray, but without thy gentle smile, lifeless e'er are they. As thy look falls on the leaf, it begins to sing, and the prize that's due to love in her ear doth ring. Like a Memnon's statue, now every letter seems, which in music wakes when kissed by morning's beams. Bit of longing, bit of music in here. It fits with this game. The developer mentioned that all of these books, they're in the public domain, so he didn't have to ask for any permissions to publish it in his own game. He's not selling these books, they're just part of the game. He never intended for people to actually sit through the game and read the books. He thought they would just use them as a mechanic for idle reading to just help pass the time. But, the meta experience of why not enjoy that passing of the time? You never imagine people actually doing that. But yeah, this is something interesting. The person who writes, and they never imagine it being to the ear, because you read it silently to yourself, but you can read it out loud. Why not? It's kind of like when you read a text and you say, not what I read, but what I heard, right? Didn't you say in that text, I heard, did it? It's hard to put it in the right context. You know what I mean, though. He came to meet me. Oh, notice that turning this page does nothing. Turning to a page that I have not read causes the time to decrease by a minute. So it's interesting to think how that was developed, how that was coded as the developer to keep track of every single page as you turn. He came to meet me in rain and thunder, my heart again beating in timid wonder. Could I guess whither thenceforth together our path should run so long asunder? He came to meet me in rain and thunder, with guile to cheat me, my heart to plunder. Was't mine he captured, or his I raptured? Halfway both met in bliss and wonder. He came to meet me in rain and thunder. Spring blessings greet me, spring blossoms under. What though he leave me? No partings grieve me, no path can lead our hearts asunder. Oh, it's over. Poetry is weird. Just the repeating patterns of it. Sometimes I wonder why. Why do they keep repeating that? But I suppose they have to make it fit to that lyrical, what's the word? Pattern? Rhythm? Though thou art rest and peace of soul, thou woundest the breast and makest it whole. To thee I vow, mid joy or pain, my heart, where thou mayest aye remain. A or I? Mayst I remain? That sounds right. Then enter free, and bar the door to all but thee for evermore. All other woes thy charms shall lull, of sweet repose this heart be full. My worshipping eyes, thy presence bright, shall still suffice their only light. Murmur not, and say thou art in fetters holden. Murmur not that thou earth's heavy yoke must bear. Say not that a prison is this world so golden. 'Tis thy murmurs only set its harsh walls there. Question not how shall this riddle find its reading. It will solve itself full soon without thine aid. Say not love hath turned his back and left thee bleeding. Whom hath love deserted, hast thou heard it said? If death tries to fright thee, fear not beyond measure. He will flee from those who boldly face his frown. Hunt not thou the fleeting deer of worldly pleasure. Lion it will turn, and hunt the hunter down. Chain thyself no longer, heart, to any treasure. Then thou shalt not thou art into fetters thrown. Why do they make poetry that's like a tongue twister? I get it. It's sort of you make it fancy. It's like you're just decorating it. You're adding reels. You're adding juice if you're talking in video game development terms. But when you add so much juice to the words, I guess, okay, here's a thought. It's intended to slow you down. My thought about this is because I know people who read poetry very fast, even poems they've written themselves. And I often say to him or them, slow down. I'm trying to, capture the words, but perhaps they're nervous. And in their nervousness, they just recite it very quickly. And you're not allowing the person to absorb the imagery that goes with it. Because poems, it's like an imagery. It's trying to capture this moment in some just fanciful way with words, right? And one way of slowing people down is to just add juice, make the words juicy, make them tongue twister in a way that you have to take your time to read them. And that way, even if you're nervous, it allows enough time for the listener to absorb it, to put that image together. Because that's the whole point of poetry, is to grasp that moment, that image. Like, these people didn't have video. They didn't have cameras when they were writing poems. They couldn't capture it with nothing but words. So I guess you can say it's adding resolution to the words, to add these frills and just these extra dense phonetics that they frustrate me to read. But you know what? I think I understand now why they do it. It's one of those moments where you ask the question and, hey, there's your answer. Sometimes it just takes voicing the question to come to that conclusion. That's interesting, though. Poems. Yeah. Also, all these poems we've read so far, they've titled the title as like the very first few words of the poem. Why do they do that? Maybe I shouldn't ask that question. Maybe they're just lazy. Evening Song. I stood on the mountain summit. Ah, they didn't do it here. Thank you. I stood on the mountain summit, at the hour when the sun did set. I marked how it hung o'er the woodland, the evening's golden net. And, with the dew descending, a peace on the earth there fell. Nature lay hushed in quiet, the voice of the evening bell. I said, O heart, consider what silence all things keep, and with each child of the meadow prepare thyself to sleep. For every flower is closing in silence its little eye, and every wave in the brooklet more softly murmureth by. The weary caterpillar hath nestled beneath the weeds, all wet with dew now slumbers the dragonfly in the reeds. The golden beetle hath laid him in a rose-leaf cradle to rock, now went to their nightly shelter the shepherd and his flock. The lark from on high is seeking in the moistened grass her nest. The hart and the hind have laid them in their woodland haunt to rest. And whoso owneth a cottage to slumber hath laid him down, and he that roams among strangers in dreams shall behold his own. And now doth a yearning seize me at this hour of peace and love, that I cannot reach the dwelling, the home that is mine above. This sounds like not the perspective of a person, but of some bird that's fallen from the nest. And it's just looking upon everything and having this realization of how big everything is, that every little flower, it's folding up, every little other thing and what it's doing and going home at this moment, but yet it itself can't go. Fucking cool, man. That's deep. I like that. Chidher, the ever-youthful, told, I passed a city, bright to see. A man was culling fruits of gold. I asked him how old this town might be. He answered, culling as before, This town stood ever in days of yore, and will stand on for evermore. 500 years from yonder day, I passed again the self-same way. And of the town I found no trace. A shepherd blew on a reed instead. His herd was grazing on the place. How long, I asked, is this city dead? He answered, blowing as before, The new crop grows, the old one o'er. This was my pasture evermore. 500 years from yonder day, I passed again the self-same way. A sea I found. The tide was full. A sailor emptied nets with cheer. And when he rested from his pull, I asked how long that sea was here. Then laughed he with a hearty roar, as long as wave have washed this shore. They fished here ever in days of yore. 500 years from yonder day, I passed again the self-same way. I found a forest settlement, and o'er his axe a tree to fell. Saw a man in labor bent. How old this wood I bade him tell. 'Tis everlasting, long before I lived it stood, in days of yore. He quoth, and shall grow evermore. 500 years from yonder day, I passed again the self-same way. I saw a town. The market square was swarming with a noisy throng. How long, I asked, has this town been there? Where are wood and sea and shepherd song? They cried, nor heard among the roar. This town was ever so before, and so will live forevermore. 500 years from yonder day, I want to pass the self-same way. Seeing a long pattern. That the pattern repeats. That's cool. That's where philosophy comes from. The idea of perspective. The idea of philosophy is not to get into philosophical debate and all that such. It's to expand your mind, to open yourself to more depths of thought that perhaps you've never had before. Like that one poem of this small creature who had just for the first time realized that everything in the meadow sleeps. And in some way, he took it for granted. Well, I didn't really take it for granted. He gained that perspective of how much of it was going to sleep in that moment. And that's what philosophy is supposed to do. And this person, having gone through this pattern the first time, it was interesting. And they say, where did everything go? But now they're seeing perhaps it's a cycle and it will happen again. Maybe that's what I'm doing with playing this game again. At 40 years. When for 40 years we've climbed the rugged mountain, we stop and backward gaze. Yonder still, we see our childhood's peaceful fountain, and youth exulting strays. One more glance behind, and then, youth strength acquiring, staff grasped, no longer stay. See, a further slope, a long one, still aspiring, e'er downward, turns the way. Take a brave long breath, and toward the summit hie thee. The goal shall draw thee on, when thou thinkest it least, the destined end is nigh thee. Sudden, the journey's done. It seems very metaphorical. Before the doors, I went to knock at Rich's door, or Rich's door. They threw me a farthing, the threshold over. To the door of love did I then repair, but 15 others already were there. To honor's castle I took my flight. They opened to none but to belted night. To house of labor I sought to win, but I heard a wailing sound within. To the house of content I sought the way, but none could tell me where it lay. One quiet house I yet could name, where last of all I'll admittance claim. Many the guests that have knocked before, but still, in the grave, there's room for more. It seems like this person was looking for their place in life, and they find that whatever place you have in life, I guess there's always room in the grave. In that room. House. Pilgrim Before St. Just's. I guess, we play games, right? We have these thoughts. We've been told these thoughts. And, like, that one comes as, like, yeah, okay, already been there. I've already had that thought. It's not really a deep thought for me. I suppose with poetry or books, that's perhaps your only resource, other than finding people who actively tell stories. In other cultures, that's far more common to be able to go out, and you'll find people who keep those old traditions of telling the stories in the same way that they had heard it, passed down from one generation to the next. But there are storytellers who travel from one place to the next, telling the tales, keeping that alive in some way. They could do so through like television, but then they would be out of work. It's neat to know, though, that there are people who still do that. The Pilgrim Before St. Just's. 'Tis night, and tempests whistle o'er the moor. O Spanish father, ope the door. Deny me not the little boon I crave, thine order's vesture and a grave. Grant me a cell within thy convent shrine. Half this world and more was mine. Thy head that to the tonsure now stoops down was circled once by many a crown. The shoulders fretted now with the shirt of hair. Did once this imperial ermine wear. Now I as the dead, ever death is come, and sink in ruins like old Rome. The grave of Alaric. On Bucento's grassy banks, a muffled chorus echoes nightly, while the swirling eddies answer and the wavelets ripple lightly. Up and down the river, shades of Gothic warriors watch her keeping, for they mourn their people's hero, Alaric, with sobs of weeping. All too soon and far from home, and kindred here to rest they laid him, while in youthful beauty still his flowing golden curls arrayed him. And along the river's bank 1,000 hands with eager striving labored long, another channel for Bucento's tide contriving. Then a cavern deep they hollowed in, the river bed depleted, placed therein the dead king, clad in proof, upon his charger seated. O'er him and his proud array the earth they filled, and covered loosely, so that on their hero's grave the water plants would grow profusely. And again the course they altered of Bucento's waters troubled. In its ancient channel rushed, the current foamed and hissed and bubbled. And the Goths in chorus chanted, Hero sleep, tiny frame immortal Roman, greed shall ne'er insult, nor break thy tomb's most sacred portal. Thus they sang, and paeans sounded, high above the flight's commotion. Onward roll Bucento's waves, and bear them to the farthest ocean. So yeah, this one, it doesn't really expand the mind. As I was saying, I guess to think of poetry like a picture or like a movie, it's just capturing this moment of this hero being buried and adding all the juice so that way the person will read it slowly to capture the image of what they're trying to say with words. That's kind of neat. I wonder what else we can do that with. Like, we do this with pictures, we do this with music, we do this with video games. What else could we do this with? I know a lot of people had a lot of hopes for VR and what VR can mean, and it will be the next greatest thing. They say that because when the computers were made, the personal computer, there was a period of about 10 years of personal computer where that was the greatest thing. And then it became what was it? Um, like the Palm Pilot or something like that, or I forgot what the next innovation was. Eventually, it became the cell phone, and the cell phone, they've existed for over 10 years. And this is something I heard in a talk roughly a couple years ago. And they were saying that 10-year gap, that pattern that we're starting to see emerge with technology, where the next greatest thing comes out. It's been over 10 years since that smartphone was announced and put on the market, and it became the next greatest thing. That we're at the period of time where the next greatest thing should be out. It should be already existing. And at that time, VR had come out, and people were saying, this is it, this is the thing. But it's strange because if you look at the statistics, and I'm drawing this from a convention I had gone to. There's a convention I visit, it's called the Game Developers Conference, GDC. There was one that I attended that was specifically for VR. One of the very first talks, they presented their statistics, their finding of all the different places VR is being used, and what does that look like on the whole? And gaming was a very small percentage of it. Don't quote me on the numbers because I don't have the graph in front of me, but it was somewhere around 10%, more or less. And when it comes to the gaming, what kind of games people were playing. So VR was a big thing, but it was big for other industries, not for video games, which is interesting. But is it the next biggest thing? But my thought, right, what else could we use to tell stories in some way? Perhaps just injecting it directly into your brain. Like when I played Torment, being able to capture a memory in some way that you can feel it, you can smell it, you can not just feel it emotionally, but physically. That would be intense. I guess it's like Deep Dive, which, if you're familiar with Sword Art Online, sort of VR, where you just completely deep dive and you get all the emotions and feelings. Well, in that story, it was banned because bad things happened, but right. Remorse. How I started up in the night, drawn on without rest or reprieval. The streets with their watchmen were lost to my sight, as I wandered so light in the night, through the gate with the arch medieval. The mill brook rushed from its rocky height, leaned o'er the bridge in my yearning. Deep under me I watched, the waves in their flight, as they glided so light in the night, yet backward not one was returning. O'erhead were revolting, so countless and bright, the stars in melodious existence, and with them the moon, more serenely bedight. They sparkled so light in the night, through the magical measureless distance. And upward I gazed in the night, and again on the waves in their fleeting. Lo, thou hast wasted thy days in delight. Now silence, thou light, in the night, the remorse in my heart that is beating. Would I were free as are my dreams. Would I were free as are my dreams, sequestered from the garish crowd, to gild by banks of quiet streams, cooled by the shadow drifting cloud. Free to shake off this weary weight of human sin, and rest instead on nature's heart inviolate, all summer singing o'er my head. There would I never disembark, nay, only graze the flowery shore, to pluck a rose beneath the lark, then go my liquid way once more, and watch far off the drowsy lines of herded cattle crop and pass, the vintagers among the vines, the mowers in the dewy grass. And nothing would I drink or eat, save heaven's clear sunlight, and the spring of earth's own welling water sweet, that never make the pulses sting. Sonnet. Oh, he whose pain means life, whose life means pain, may feel again what I have felt before, who has beheld his bliss above him soar, and when he sought it, lie away again, who in a labyrinth has tried in vain, when he has lost his way, to find a door, whom love has singled out for nothing more than with despondency his soul to bane, who begs each lightning for a deadly stroke, each stream to drown the heart that cannot heal from all the cruel stabs by which it broke, who does begrudge the dead their beds like steel where they are safe from love's beguiling yoke. He knows me quite and feels what I must feel. Dude, all just reading about heartbreak. A lot of these are about just love and heartbreak. I tried writing poetry. Not really my thing, especially when it came to like love poems. The king. The ancient king of souls, unnamed, the Kaiser great, within the castle cavern, sits in enchanted state. He did not die, but ever waits in the chamber deep, where hidden under the well he sat himself to sleep. The splendor of the empire he took with him away, and back to earth will bring it when dawns the promised day. To end all fear and longing, he shall rise when time has come, taking the world within him to final Armageddon. He bids his shade in slumber, O dwarf, stay at my side, for a soul can't leave this cavern, but a mere body might. And there we have it. This was the inspiration for The Longing. The developer, he went to some caverns. I don't recall the name. I should have looked it up. I should have kept it as a note. So he went to these caves. He went to these caverns, and there is this story, this poem. And they talk about, deep under the caverns, there is this king. And, there's this little bit of this shade, this dwarf that accompanied the king. And he wondered, what does this dwarf live like? What is the life of this dwarf? What passions does this dwarf have? How does it live? What does it do? And it says, it's kind of attending the key here, or the king, until a certain time for this Armageddon. And what does this dwarf do in that time? Well, we have 400 days. What do we do with that time? I'm not going to squander it. I'm going to make the most of it. So that's why I'm taking my time to read poems, to seize the day, I guess you could say. A lot of these other poems, they're about, a person who thought they had a lot of time. The one person climbing the mountain, and suddenly they were at the destination. They died. And it was just, oh, okay. We didn't expect that. We didn't foresee that in the distance. It was just there. And, hey, you're here. Yeah, so putting some thoughts together about our shade. Oh, how the time flies. I should be reading more. We've passed an additional half hour just from our reading. So, from looking at the pictures of our shade, ooh, a piece of coal, we can kind of assume that this is an afterlife. There was a picture for above, there was a picture for below. There's a well-known saying, as above, so below. Nobody knows exactly what it means, but a lot of people have come to mean as on earth, as is in heaven kind of thing. Life and the afterlife will mirror each other sort of thing. There was some imagery of our shade, the birth. And there was one of being in a womb, and there was a second called leaf. And there were images of a tree being above ground, a tree being below ground. And trees are interesting because some trees, more than other plants, half of the tree's body is underneath the ground, its roots. So as above, so below kind of thing. So one side would mirror the other. That's kind of what they're trying to say. And for our shade, this is perhaps the afterlife. And he is born in a servitude to care for the king. So our shade, what he does with his time, he's lonely. He wishes to end all fear and longing. And how does he do so? Some of the poetry mentions the idea of death or the heartbreak. Those people who have felt heartbreak, who wish it to be gone, the only thing that will cure it is death. And that's just not to say go kill yourself because you have a heartbreak. It's more of that death cures all. You know, you don't feel anything after that, unless perhaps you have an afterlife. So that's kind of the essence of what the game is all about, is what do we do with this time, the longing, what we're longing for, longing to be free perhaps. Some of the people in poetry who realize that their longing is almost over and they had squandered it just to satisfy themselves, to just feel good. It looks like our shade is slowly disappearing, but you can see now and again the graphics will update just a little bit with our digging. So this game is dark, and it intends to be 100% so. It's not trying to cheat this feeling of longing, of remorse, of being lonely, and the darker side of that, and what options we may have available to us to end our longing. We mentioned, you know, the developer had 3 intended ways to play the game, but that doesn't mention the 4 different endings. Let me see. Is it 4? 1, 2... Technically 5? There are 5 that I can think of. 5 that I know of. Right. So just because you have one intended way of playing a game doesn't mean that's going to have a natural outcome to a single ending. I guess, let me think. Yeah, forks in the road. If we do nothing, obviously there is perhaps just one ending available to us to wake the king. The second, you know, caring for our home. Perhaps we enjoy the time, we speed up the time, and you have still available the ending to awaken the king. But in your travelings, you may explore and find something that can lead you to a completely different ending or two. And then the idea of leaving the cave. It's there that we find the other 3 endings. And we'll be exploring that more in the future. I think for the next few days, we're probably going to read, because, let's see if I can open this without disrupting our digging. Right. We have a spider who's building a web for an undetermined amount of time. We have a stalactite that will fall within a week. We have a bit of moss that will grow in 2 weeks. We have a pool of water that will grow within a month. So we can look forward to this. Within a week, this will have fallen. We've already spent a day and some hours. If we continue to do so, it will probably have been a week in 3 days or less. I think what we can do instead is we can go out. Well, we could read, but today we've only saved an additional half an hour. I imagine we would save another perhaps 5 hours just staying within our cave, unless time improves just from our digging. So then it will take, we'll have gained, instead of just 29 hours within a day, more than that, you know. I think we can go around tomorrow, look around for more decorations. What else can we do to speed up that time? That way we can reach the 1 week marker and we can explore beyond this stalactite and see what other places that we can uncover. Because I mean to share a lot of the lore that the game has available. I don't mind just hanging out, reading books. And we may be doing that for some time. So I guess it comes down to, we may only be able to read one large book before we've completed everything that we've wanted to do. Could read Moby Dick. I could read Thus Spoke Zarathustra. Granted, we only have part 1 of that book, so that means we're going to have to discover other parts. It was mentioned there's perhaps a library somewhere, and we did discover a doorway to the library. However, that doorway was barricaded. So we can start to explore and figure out our way to that doorway. But we could start that book, this book, Zarathustra. I'm probably going to do some research online, see some ratings, which of the books are worth more, which one has more pages when you combine all the volumes together. But yeah, I think that would be fun. I guess I wonder more of which book would we gain more out of? Because there are some books that are fun and they're enjoyable, but afterwards it's kind of like, okay, I've just idled my time. I didn't really gain anything from it. Like some of those poetry, like that one, that little, I just have the image of this bird in this field and there's a tree above it and it's just laying there helpless and just enjoying as everything comes to night. That could be a metaphor for like night being death or whatever, but who knows? It can't return home. That one just stuck in my head, like I gained something from that. I would like to read a long book that does that. The longing itself is that kind of experience. There is something to be gained from it. For many people, this game has helped them battle their depression. Because, now here's a thought. This is something I wanted to bring up in a previous stream, but didn't really fit. The shade, when he was walking in a pool of water, he said, "It's not deep enough for me to drown myself in." And that's kind of like the shade is willing to kill himself. Okay, and he's just looking for places to do it. Damn, what's wrong, Shade? Like, why would you do that? But that's how depression feels sometimes, you know? You just start to ponder those thoughts. So I've heard an interesting thing that suicide is not something that comes naturally. If you were just lonely your entire life, you wouldn't know what to do with it, and you would figure out things to do. And granted, you may come to the conclusion of suicide on your own. However, it's not natural. Most people, they learn about suicide. Somebody has taught them that it is an option. It's not like they're going to sit somebody down and say, hey, you have this option. It's just more of you hear of it, you learn of it, and it's just like, oh, why did they do that? Oh, well, they were sad, or this and that. And so in some way, you sort of piece together that that's a solution to sadness, to longing, suicide. And that's why there's a lot of help groups out there to say, look, there are other solutions. You've just not been taught them. You've only been taught the one, and that's because of like negative circumstance. It's not a normal thing to teach people like what to do with depression, because I guess in some ways people just don't want to talk about it. If we don't talk about it, it's not there, right? But then it is there for those people, and how do they deal with it? And if the only thing they've learned is suicide, well, what do you think is going to happen? You know, and unless they discover something, they find something within themselves that like gives them a different solution. So this game, it has been that solution for many people of experiencing the longing with the shade, seeing how the shade overcomes issues, how the shade overcomes loneliness, perhaps by decorating their room, just biding their time one day at a time, and finding things that help them pass the time. But there are other things. There are other events and experiences to be had, things that are out of our reach. It's interesting to say because it's further away in time for us to be able to reach them. So we have to just bide our time in some ways until then. Which means we're digging. We're creating something that hasn't been there before. In some ways you can think of it like as a game, well, the developers intended this, they're just covering it up. But I like to think of it as a way of, you know, the shade has had disappointments, right? Where he climbs up a stairway and he reaches the end of the stairway and there's nothing there. And he's disappointed because he thought perhaps he would see something new that he had never seen before. But whoever had started that work never finished. It is disappointing. You know, why did they quit? Why did they stop? Why didn't they finish what they set out to do? And I kind of like this. It is a way of dealing with that longing of setting out to create something that doesn't already exist. And that's what our shade's doing for now. I don't think we'll finish today, but that's okay. I know this is often one of those moments where you just want to push on, stay up later than you normally would, and these projects, they drive you in some way. They're kind of reason to live. I've gotten caught up in it. I can relate to that feeling. However, knowing when you wake up tomorrow that you have something to work on, that's an option you can have as well.